I believe 100% in the locker room. And that's where I've worked for many great coaches and have a lot of mentors. And a lot of them were X's and O's, structure guys and skill development guys. But, one of the best I ever worked for was Dick Umili. And Dick Umili at UNH, he knew every player in our locker room, what made them tick, what made them go, what they couldn't deal with, what they could deal with, what they could handle. And that's kind of where I've leaned into, is more of that locker room, because I think that's what this generation wants. They're willing to work and they're willing to sacrifice, but they need to feel that value, as you said. And if I focus on the locker room, everybody's the same in the room. We're not on the rink, everybody's the same. So we expect the same things.
That was Scott Borek, head coach of the NCAA Merrimack Warriors, currently the number 5 ranked team in the nation. And you are listening to the Up My Hockey podcast with Jason Podolin. Just watch me now. Welcome to Up My Hockey with Jason Podolin, where we deconstruct the NHL journey, discuss what it takes to make it, and have a few laughs along the way. I'm your host, Jason Podolin, a 31st overall draft pick who played 41 NHL games, but thought he was destined for 1,000. Learn from my story and those of my guests. This is a hockey podcast about reaching your potential. Hey there, and welcome back to the Up My Hockey podcast with Jason Podolin. I am your host, Jason Podolin, and today we are interviewing Mr. Scott Borek. He is the head coach of the Merrimack Warriors, currently his 5th year as the head coach of the program. And he has really brought Merrimack out of the basement. It was a program that was overlooked and not believed in. And he said in the interview, which I found really interesting, that we had just to stop apologizing for being Merrimack. We had to change our belief system. We had to change our mindset around what Merrimack is, what we are, and what we could become. And it's been a 5-year process, but here we are, sitting at number 5 currently as I'm recording this, and having the best year pretty much in school history. So super fun to talk to Scott just about his approach to the team, to the organization, to the recruitment process, how he went about trying to change the culture, and to produce a program that can compete on the national level in an amazingly competitive conference in Hockey East. So there's lots of gold in this interview for sure. Scott's an emotional and intense guy. He comes by it honestly. He'll be the first one to tell you. His players will also be the first ones to tell you that he wears his heart in his sleeve. And today we get into the nuts and bolts of all things Merrimack, and even the tragic loss of his assistant coach Josh, and we get into that and what that meant to him and the team, and how they've been able to move forward from it, and or forward. I guess you never move past or on, but trying their best to deal with such a tragedy. And there's just a lot in this interview, and I think that the amazing part about the interview itself is that it only happened because of a connection that I had with one of my clients in Nathan Mackey, and we talk about that in the interview here as well, where Scott and Merrimack were really keen on having Nathan join their program, and Scott did some homework and found out that I had been working with Nathan for the last couple of years, and he wanted me to get some insight on Nathan and what he was about, and not only as a player, but most importantly as a person. And through that conversation, I ended up creating a relationship with Scott that now, he said he'd love to come on the podcast, and now so here he is. And it's amazing the way these things work, right? The interpersonal connections that we make, whether you're in business as an entrepreneur, or whether you're in a corporate organization. Definitely the connections that we make and the people that we touch definitely matter. I'm very happy to to have Scott in my network now in some capacity. Network is potentially the wrong word, but in my ecosystem. He's love what he was talking about. I love what he's all about, what he stands for, what he's trying to do on a daily basis. I have the utmost respect for that, and being able to share 60 minutes with him now, and hear some of the things that he's doing there. I'm always looking and trying to grow myself, and I know Scott is too, and to be able to have somebody that maybe I could text or call and get his opinion on, or maybe be able to share a player that I know of here that could help the Merrimack Warriors someday in the future. I think I get fired up about that type of stuff. So thank you again to hockey and to the hockey world for bringing Scott into my ecosystem and into my universe, and now because he's in my universe, he's in your universe, and you're going to get 60 minutes or a little over 60 minutes of value from a head coach of a highly ranked D1 university. So as far as you guys listening today, whether you're a parent or a coach or an athlete, listen to what Scott has to say. Listen to what he values. Listen to how he shifted his own narrative on what it takes to win hockey games, and how his belief in what is important now is allowing some of the biggest success that he's seen, and that is putting the dressing room first, and the people in that dressing room first. And I just think there's so much gold here, and I was really, really happy that we had the conversation. So without further ado, I bring you the head coach of the Merrimack Warriors, currently number 5 in the entire nation, and looking with their sights on a national championship, Scott Borek. Enjoy the conversation. Scott Borek, head coach of the Merrimack Warriors. Scott, thanks so much for being on the show.
Well, thanks for having us, Jason. Really appreciate it.
This is pretty cool for me because your area of the game is something that I am a bit unfamiliar with. So I'm really excited to have this conversation. I'm a junior guy myself, major junior, and out west, as you know, there's no collegiate D1 programs out here yet. It actually blows me away. I do know the teams I work with, BCHL, obviously gets recruited out to your neck of the woods. But as far as me, I'm a bit of a neophyte when it comes to the college system. So I'm looking forward to our discussion here today.
Well, it's funny. I actually recently, within the last 2 hours, had a team from PEI here that we toured, a midget minor team. And, I'm always very careful to talk about the comparisons, major, junior, and college hockey, because as you can tell, I'm from Boston, and I have no experience in it. It's not for me to talk about, but there's a route for everybody. And as long as you investigate both and you consider both and then make a thoughtful decision, I think you're going to have a good opportunity wherever you go.
Yeah, I agree. What do you think it is, now that I brought it up, actually, and that wasn't really on my list of things to talk about, but all these schools out east that have these hockey programs, yet there's these NHL teams that are growing more and more on the West Coast, that they have great systems themselves as far as like growing hockey players out west. Is there a time coming where a USC or some of these schools out west will have hockey programs?
I really believe there is, and I think it's closer than I could even imagine. I would have thought that it would eventually get there, but that maybe not in my coaching lifetime. But I think with the emergence of Arizona State, a Pac-12 team, they've had a lot of success. They built their own arena. They're filling their rink. I think it's just a matter of time before we see that. And I actually think we might even see a program like UBC or Simon Fraser or one of those teams try to enter the fray. That would be unusual for the NCAA because it doesn't usually cross borders. But the NCAA is becoming much more liberal in its thinking right now. And so I don't think it's that far-fetched to think that will happen, where a division of Pac-12 types teams, Washington, USC, UCLA, may merge with like a Simon Fraser and UBC and create a league, Western Conference in college hockey.
That'd be exciting. That'd be super fun, especially for the players out here. And it would become more on the radar, I think, just with the casual hockey fan out here, of course, right? Because it's just more present, it's more relevant, and I think it would add much more exposure to the game. So that'd be awesome if it ever going that way. I should say congratulations. Like, depends on what ranking I look at. I've seen you as high as 10th ranked right now, and also, as high as 5th and also 10th nationally. What ranking system do you go off of, first of all, and what a great thing to be.
Really, it's the pairwise ranking where we're 5th right now is the one that we focus on when we consider it, only because that's the one the national tournament gets picked out of. So if you're in the top 15 in that situation, you'll be making the national tournament. And that's obviously the goal of every program. It's really not important. Like, it's funny, it is important on Merrimack's campus right now because it hasn't happened in a couple of decades. But it's not really important to our season because there's so much of our season in front of us. So it's nice, and certainly we're getting some platitudes that we haven't had in a long time. But you know how that can turn when you lose a couple of games, and all of a sudden it gets very quiet.
Well, it's probably something that I would assume. I mean, you're in your fifth season now, and I did a little bit of research on it. And upon your arrival, there wasn't much success in the win-loss column. So some of the players that you've started with, you had a big freshman class there a few years ago, so they've been through the weeds, let's say, a little bit. So now I'm sure they're super appreciative of where they're at, what you guys have been able to accomplish, and they're probably not too keen on being complacent about the success they're having.
No, it's true. The first year we came in, we obviously inherited a team that wasn't a strong team. Ironically, we had great leadership on that team. Michael Babcock, Mike's son, was our captain, and he was an incredible leader. And he actually got us through what I would consider an extremely difficult season, where not only were we not successful on the rink, we had to change the roster, and it's not something where you can just trade guys. We had to make some roster moves that had some really negative impacts on some players and families, and it was hard. It was the first 2 years here were really, really hard. As we started to turn the corner, COVID hit, and that was just obviously like a blank in everybody's life. So it's nice now to be on the other side of both of those things and to have this senior class who came in and trusted us when we weren't very good. To be having that success is really positive, and it's really been something I take a lot of pride in.
Yeah, and you should. And when I was reading your bio, there was mention of Mission Merrimack, which is something that you brought in with you. Would you mind shedding some light on what that means and how you helped to change the culture there?
Well, when I got to Merrimack, I had been at not several, but two different schools that competed in the same league. I had worked at University of New Hampshire for 13 years. And then at Providence for 6 years on two different occasions. So I was very familiar with the league, and I always felt that Merrimack's biggest issue was just apologizing for being Merrimack. We're the smallest school in the division. We have the smallest arena in the division. We've had the least amount of success in the division. No history of Division I's real success. And yet, we compete and we battle, but I always felt that the logo in the front sometimes impacted the results of the games and how the players felt. And so, I remember my first year, we'd lose a game 4-3, and that was okay. And that's just not okay in life. And so, we had to turn that. And I kind of coined that phrase, Mission Merrimack. So, there's no apologizing. There's no moral victories. It's going to take a lot of work. And obviously the word mission implies a lot of work. It's going to take a lot of work in a lot of different areas. We need to work, obviously, on the rink and the strength room. We had to work on our campus to sell to our student body that, we could be a competitive Division I team and competitive in Hockey East. We had to work with our alumni to have them believe that and come back to it and expect success from us. So the mission piece was simply the work that was going to be needed to do it. And if you put a word to something, I think sometimes you can actually give the guys the vision and they can follow that.
Yeah, I mean, that's big. Ironically, last night I was in front of 26 coaches, and we were a lot of what we were talking about was culture, and what culture is, and it's become a bit of a buzzword, I think, in the in the sports community. Well, even in big business, right? Like, what kind of culture does your organization have? Your corporation, your team. And there is some science around what that is, but it's hard to measure, and two, it's really hard to put a finger on it. And one of the ways that I described it, I said, well, it's got to be observable behavior, right? You have to, a culture is a feeling, yes, but you have to be able to see things that are now different, right? That you can say, yes, we're successful in this or not. What are some of the observable behaviors that you would point to your team this year with a set of beliefs potentially that is different than when on your first arrival?
Well, I think that the biggest thing that's happened to our team in the last 2 years is that, one more, do one more. And that is something the players actually brought to the program. I didn't say that. I didn't make that part of the mission, but we had some actually older guys come in. One of our captain last year was from Vancouver, Max Newton. He had transferred here from Alaska. He was a captain at Alaska. And he just had just the way he went about his daily routine. In the morning, he was doing yoga at 6. And our guys had never done something like that, but they started doing it. Then we started having a little bit of success, and they kept doing it. And then it's being integrated into our program now, where that happens all the time. When I first got here, the team would be in the weight room twice a week. And right away, we said, no, we're in the weight room 4 days a week. Even if you're not lifting on Tuesdays and Thursdays, you're still stretching, rolling out. You're still doing athletic exercises. And I think just the room, the smell of it, the feel of it, I think that makes you a stronger hockey player, a stronger person. So those are the things that I think we tried to do. And then this year, one thing that we did, and it was, I think, one of the strongest things we've done since I've been here, is we invited the program to our campus. The program is a company that was formed by Navy SEALs. There was a helicopter crash in 1999 where 7 of their men perished. And the 3 survivors decided to create a company that would pay for the education of those 7 families, which is pretty amazing goal to have. And they've done that, and they come to your campus, and they came to our campus for 2 days and put us through things that were extremely uncomfortable, and really helped us. And they gave us a saying, add value, take strain. And that has spread through our locker room in a really positive way. We want the guy next to you not to feel the strain, because you're adding value to his day, to his game, to everything in his life. And that was a really important step for us as well.
I love that. You mind sharing any one particular activity that stood out that they had you guys do?
My favorite activity they did. So keep in mind, this is at 4:45 in the morning. Both, Navy SEALs are famous for the morning, right? So we met them on September 2nd at an outdoor pool that was not very far from campus. It was important it was outdoors because that added to the strain of it, because it was a little chilly at 4:45 in the morning. They did all these exercises in the pool, and hockey players aren't necessarily very comfortable in the pool. And the one thing they did, I thought, that really stood out to me was you had to wear a hooded sweatshirt in the pool, and they had to take it off. You were in the deep end. There was no standing. You were in an 11-foot deep end, and you had to take it off, tread water, hold it over your head, put it back on. This went on for like 30 minutes. Then they let the guys go to the wall, get a little bit of a break. And they went back in, did the same thing, except this time you and I had to exchange sweatshirts. And you had to put mine on, and I had to put yours on. And it's one thing putting your own on in water, which is very difficult, but putting someone else's on in water, different. Our goalie is a 6'8", 250-pound guy, and he had to put someone else's sweatshirt on. And we have no one else on our team who's going to wear that same sweatshirt. So it was incredible. And the video of it, which we took, we actually have players holding guys up, getting underneath them, the guys who are really struggling in the water, holding them up while they put sweatshirts on. I mean, even now it gives me the chills to think about it, because that's things that, guys don't want to touch each other in the water. Guys don't want to be that close, but you're forced to do that. And I just think it was an amazing experience for us. And it helped us get to another level as a family. And it's something I think we've been able to carry forward.
That's fantastic. Yeah, that's really fantastic. I love that, when you're forced to find solutions to problems that you never even knew existed, right? And
exactly.
And then it just comes, that type of relatability, that connectedness, it starts to become more natural.
Hello there, Jason Podolin here. This week there's a special offer, and it's so special that I am recording this from my truck on the road and on my phone. So apology for the audio quality. I'm not in my studio, but I wanted to make sure you guys knew about what is happening here prior to Christmas. And what is happening is that I am offering the Peak Potential Hockey Project as a credit. So if you want to take the Peak Potential Hockey Project at any time in 2023, any of my guided missions, you can join whichever one you want in 2023 with a purchase prior to Christmas. As a special bonus, I am also throwing in a private onboarding coaching call with me. This is usually not included in the guided mission. So if this is something that you think your athlete should do, or if you're an athlete and you want to do it, but just haven't been able to secure the right time or the right place, then get your credit now. You can use it at any point in 2023, plus you get a free onboarding call with me, which is something that I usually don't offer. So there you have it. It's available at upmyhockey.com. Make sure you get in there, get your credit, and make sure that you invest in your mindset. You know it's what you should be doing. You know it's going to give you the competitive advantage that you need. And yeah, why not just make it happen? So Merry Christmas. Hope you enjoy the rest of the episode. Happy holidays.
That vulnerability piece, which is the V word that I don't really like using, because especially around hockey players, like we assign gladiatorship to ourselves, right? And then the way we go about our business. But I do think that level of vulnerability where a guy is struggling in the water, or whether it's somebody who says something in the locker room, like the ability to be vulnerable, to allow somebody else into your world as a team, is something that really can bring a team forward. So when that gets exposed and then they see the value in it, now it becomes more natural, I think, probably throughout the rest of the year. For sure. It was, they have 4 different programs, so you could actually have them with you for 4 years, and each year the player would be doing something different. This one was really powerful. We're going to really work hard to try to get them back, because it really did change. It just brought the group together, and that was powerful. I like how you said they're apologizing for being Merrimack, and you talked about belief, right? Which I think is a mindset thing. And I think, that's my neck of the woods. I'm a mental performance coach, and, our operating systems, right? Like how we function and go about our day, like really matters. Like how do we start things off? That changing that belief system can be difficult though. Like what were some of the triggers or some of the ideas that you tried to institute that said, no, we're better than this, or we're different now, or we got to think about ourselves differently? What were some of the, was it trigger words or lines or actions, or how did you go about doing that with the culture? It was not really, it wasn't very verbal. It was just a work ethic that we had. And that was the one advantage we had to start my first year here. Michael Babcock was one of the hardest working people I've ever been around, and how he accepted defeat, I just didn't understand, because he worked so hard. He deserved success, but the guys around him weren't necessarily doing that. And frankly, what happened is that I did not let the players have moral victories. I did not allow that. Our work ethic in practice, it didn't matter if we weren't supposed to win and didn't win, or if we weren't supposed to win and came close. We kept grinding and grinding through it. We ended up having 19 roster changes between year 1 and year 2, because some people weren't really willing to keep up. And I think the biggest thing that I've been able to, and I really need to say we, because you can't do it yourself. You need a group of people around you. Is we were able to take our locker room and make it I hate the word family because it's so overused, but that's my belief. You win in the locker room first. The locker room is the place where your success comes out of. Everybody has good players. Everybody's a good coach. Everybody deals with the referees, some better than others. But at the end of the day, if we have the strongest locker room, then we can be successful. And this year, the one thing I would point to is we have a number of leaders on our team. I have the team not pick the captains, but suggest the captains. 3 of the players they suggested were not guys who are going to be in the lineup every night. And so the 2 that I picked out 2 of those and told them, are you going to be able to be a leader? Are you going to be able to wear a letter on your jersey and sit in the stands for games? And they both accepted that, said, yes, I can do that, but I'm going to prove that you need me, which you want every player to do. So that's great. Well, in our second game of the season, we had a guy with an A on his sweater. We had lost the first night. We had a guy with an A on his sweater who sat in the bench for 56 minutes. Didn't play a shift. He was our 13th forward. We got a lead. The guy that we had a sophomore who hasn't played a lot, but is highly skilled, but better on the offensive side than the defensive side. I slipped Mick into the lineup for the last 4 minutes of the game. We won the game. Mick had a big block at the end of the game. And I think that legitimately, if I was to point to one thing this season, I would point to that. And that's happened 3 times where our 13th forward has been a captain and has played very, very little to none. How can anyone else complain? You can't. And those guys have just embraced that so well that they've made our team much, much stronger. Wow, that's super cool. I mean, so how did you frame the suggestion of who the captains are? Did you put it on a value system? Because a lot of times, as you know, experience, whether it's at the minor hockey level or even at the NHL level, usually it's the best players that get the first notice, and then maybe we go down on, okay, what type of leadership characters do they have, or what's their work ethic like, et cetera, et cetera. But sometimes if you can reframe what that means to be a captain, then you get these suggestions. Was that something that you gave them the layout of what a captain means, or was that something they totally did on their own?
Well, what we did, and this is college-esque. We read a book. We read the book, The Energy Bus, by John Gordon. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's a book that just talks about basically the energy bus is your locker room. And on the energy bus, you're, as the coach, it's your decision who gets on the bus. It's your decision on where they sit on the bus. And it's your decision who you need to get off the bus. And that's obviously the hardest thing as a coach. So I had the whole team read that book, and then we created 10, and there's 10 rules in it. And we created 10 groups that would present to the team. And we did that, went through it. And everything in that book that they talk about is the things you want your leadership to understand. And then after we read that book, we were actually going to go into this meeting, and we didn't have a chance because life happened to us. We played our first weekend with assigned captains, but that they had picked, but that I hadn't really even introduced. And then we talked about it. We talked about, we don't want the best players. That's why two of the, basically fifth line players are captains. We don't want the best player. We don't want the most popular guy. We don't want the guy we want the guy who you firmly trust sitting next to you will do what it takes to be successful, not only for himself, but also for you. And that was all I said along with the book. And they came up with the great suggestions, and we're really fortunate. And our captain right now is a Prince George, was a Prince George captain, and he's from Abbotsford, and he's a heck of a player, and he's been a great captain for us.
That's awesome. I love that. I do think that's what it's all about. I mean, it's a people. I think it's a people accolade, right? A person accolade. And I talk about the development of the person prior to the development of the player. And when you can put the personal development first, and the personal example, like that's a great thing for everyone else to lock onto, right? Because I believe it becomes more about that growth mindset of development and what we can become together, and not what we already are. So that's a really cool significance there that you put. I'm sure they wear that letter with massive amounts of pride. And how about their personal development? These guys that you said that were 13th forwards or whatever, have they earned, as they said, like their worth to the team? Are they playing more minutes now?
Well, interestingly enough, 2 games ago, 2 of them, who are the 2 guys, ironically, who didn't play those much, played very poorly. And I had to make a decision because they've played well for us. They've sacrificed a lot for this program over the years, but also for this team over the last 2 months. And so I made a decision. Instead of doing a video where they were in it, I sent them a private video and then met with them and just said, this is unacceptable. It can't happen again. I can't play you if this is the case. And ironically, I think, and I've never done that before, but I felt I had to protect them a little bit. I did, and they played great for us last night. In the third period, the game was a 2-1 game. There was, there's adversity in every game, but when you're new to success, adversity tends to raise your anxiety a little bit higher. And those guys, they went in and dominated. Like I bet they played 4 to 5 shifts in the third period, but they dominated. We were in the offensive zone the whole time. They were excessively physical, and that's exactly what we needed. They took us over the finish line, and I give them a world of credit for it.
That's awesome. Love it. You mentioned the word trust there a little while ago. To rebuild a program or to rebrand a program, right? To institute this new culture, there has to be an immense amount of trust in you and your staff. I mean, that is another one of these words that's around, and I think it's easier said than done. How do you develop that trust between you and your players that they're going to get behind you and get behind your ideas?
Well, we meet one-on-one a lot. I think the players nowadays need that. And it's hard. That's the hardest part of my job is meeting with the players who aren't getting, I call it the cake, they're not playing, you're not getting rewarded, you're not getting excited by the fans or the campus. And, those are the players I need to spend most of my time with. Right. So I've tried to be very direct and very honest and very transparent with decisions that we make, with the reasons we make them, and have invited them into my office to discuss them whenever they wanted to. And most recently, we had a player in here who hasn't played a lot, good player, but we're 9-1 in our last 10. There's not going to be a lot of changes to the lineup, and that's why I let those players go through the way I did the last time, because they played really well going into that game. But he came in and he was off the bus, and I was very honest and direct with him that if you're going to stay off the bus, and you have to leave, and I love this young man. I recruited him for 3 years myself. He wasn't an assistant coach's recruit. He was my recruit. And I just think he was not seeing the team through the right lens. It was kind of a why me. And whenever we get to why me, and then the words, well, my confidence, you're not giving me a chance to get my confidence. And you can't give me that responsibility. That's your responsibility. And the minute you hand it to me, you've let go of it, and you never guaranteed it's coming back. So I've tried to be very direct. I'm sure there are players here who haven't been satisfied with that, and I'm sure there are guys who 10 years from now may appreciate it that didn't appreciate it then. But for the most part, that's one of the nice things about coaching college hockey versus a major junior team. We're dealing with a lot of men. We're dealing with 20. We do have the 18-year-olds, and there's a lot of work with those guys. But we have 24-year-old guys on our team. They're men. I can tell them what they need to know, and they can tell me whatever they want to say to me. And that's how we go. And it's been fun to see that development. I think we've been successful in quite a few situations, but I'd be lying if I told you that we were successful in every situation. So that's where the energy bus comes in, because with the ones that we're not successful in, I have to have the hard conversation with him and tell him to find a new opportunity.
Take a short break from the conversation with Scott to remind you to get out there and to review the podcast. It's amazing every week more people come into my world through the podcast with whatever it is, with whether it's a review or a thanks or this episode was amazing or love what you do. I actually had a father from New York reach out just this past week. He has a son that's an 08 who is struggling with some confidence, and said that he was exposed to me through the podcast, and now he wants. He's looking into having his son work with me, and he said that he really enjoys the podcast and loves the authenticity of it, and really looks forward to our next episodes. And it's just super cool, right? It's super cool that the podcast is been such a great avenue for people to access topics like mindset, like personal development, like the interpersonal advantages that arise through the hockey world. And a lot of these stories are new to people, right? And they were new to me at the time before I was able to live through it, and before I was able to now help athletes through some of this stuff on a one-on-one level or through a team level. So it's awesome that it's exposing my listeners to concepts that are making a difference in either their lives or in their athletes' lives. And that fires me up. And obviously it helps me on a level of the business level when people come to me and now they want to work with me, or they want to take one of my programs, they want to get their team involved. So as far as the I hate this word, reciprocity of the whole idea, giving back, allowing people to come my way as well. It's super fun. But the idea here is that the more people that listen, the more people that get value, the more people that are exposed to the concepts, the better our hockey world becomes, because everyone's going to take away something different. Some of their stories are going to change. Some of their perspectives are going to change, and that's a good thing. And it's also good for the podcast. So if you want to support the podcast at all, by all means, write the review that you haven't written yet. Support it in the fact of by sharing it, by talking about it, by getting it into your ecosystems, your personal universes, and that's it. One guest at a time, one episode at a time, as we grow this thing and get it into national prominence. Last year, when I was putting out an episode a week there for quite some time, we did get up into the top 25, I believe, in Canada for hockey podcasts. That's a huge accomplishment for somebody who's just doing it by themselves without any type of media branding behind it or any type of network or really any type of celebrity. associated with it. So it's completely content driven, and it's completely word of mouth. I mean, organically driven. So that's been the model so far, and I'm not changing it as of yet. So, do your part. If you're somebody that's here, that's listening, that is an avid listener, really enjoyed this episode. If you're new to the program, love what you're hearing from Scott, by all means, please reach out. Put the review in, share the episode on your social media, and I thank you for that, and I thank you for listening today. Now back to the episode with Scott Borek. For people to feel like a part of something, well, one, they need to feel like they belong, right? And they need to feel that they're of value. And I think the third one for me is that they need to feel challenged, and that's where the of value and the feel like they belong. It's hard, right? It's hard when you're out of the lineup, and it's hard when you haven't necessarily been given a type of role. But I really encourage players to try and find that, to try and find what that is. And obviously, if I'm the liaison between a coach and a player, that would be also what I'm would have the coach try and identify for them, right? What purpose do they serve here? Because when we don't have a purpose, like, it is hard to feel a part of it, right? But it's a super challenge, because when you are out and you don't feel like you're contributing the way you want to contribute as a player, and you've been a player and I've been a player, we both know how frustrating that can be, right? But it is a massively delicate balance, and I don't envy you at all, because I know those discussions are hard. But I think, as far as from a transparency and authenticity standpoint, the more you are those things, the more that trust and respect is there. And I guess that's really what the foundation of the whole program needs to be about, right?
No, any successful, even if you're just building, I think that has to be there. And ironically, my first year, I approached the team with, hey, this isn't hockey, this is life, and this is my classroom, and I'm gonna try to teach you through adversity. And for some of you, that's gonna mean you're gonna play less than you ever have before. Some of you, it's gonna mean you're not gonna play at all. For some of you, you're gonna get cut, and that's gonna be up to you. And so, I use the example of a used car salesman. So if I'm a used car salesman and I sell 40 cars one month, and Jason sells 2, and I go to the boss and say, I want more money, Jason gets fired, because they want me to have his money, because they want to keep me, because I sold 40 cars last month. So it's about production, and it's not, I'm not talking about points, but impactability, and what can you do to make our team better? This young man I talked about, who is struggling, we had this conversation last week. That was my direct quote to him. I said, tell me how you're making our team better. Tell me that, because you're not doing it in practice, and that's unacceptable. And you're not doing it in the locker room, because you're wearing that scowl like you want to punch me in the face. So you need to make a decision, either to add value in the role you've been given so far, or just get off the bus. And we always refer to the bus, because I believe 100% in the locker room. And that's where I've worked for many great coaches and have a lot of mentors. And a lot of them were X's and O's, structure guys and skill development guys. But, one of the best I ever worked for was Dick Umili. And Dick Umili at UNH, he knew every player in our locker room, what made them tick, what made them go, what they couldn't deal with, what they could deal with, what they could handle. And that's kind of where I've leaned into, is more of that locker room, because I think that's what this generation wants. They're willing to work and they're willing to sacrifice, but they need to feel that value, as you said. And if I focus on the locker room, everybody's the same in the room. We're not on the rink, everybody's the same. So we expect the same things.
Yeah. And I think that's coaching 2.0 now, I think, right? Like the attention to the individual in the collective, right? And I think 20 years ago it was just about the collective, and you needed to figure it out on your own about how you're supposed to be involved in that from the player perspective. And now I think there is much more, ownership from the coaches, that these guys are individuals. And to your point, the individual meetings, they need to know why, they need the ability to ask questions. A lot of these things weren't part of the coaching realm. And I think that the psychological aspect of coaching has really taken off. And I think that's where a lot of success is. So sounds like you're definitely on that bus too, to use your terminology.
Well, being a dad, and a stepdad, you have, it's funny. I really relate to that. I think you have situations at your dinner table that can relate to your locker room. Your kids feel the same way. They may have more trust in the love between the parent and the child, but they still require a lot of that same thing. And all my kids played hockey, and So I saw them go through great coaches and bad coaches, but I think that getting to know kind of what my own children responded to was important for me to develop as a coach, because I'm talking as if I'm, I don't know, that I've always focused on the locker room, because that's not the case. It's really been maturation over the last 10 years to realize that, if I want to do the best I can for this group of young men, that's where I have to focus. Anyone can do what I'm doing on the rink. I have to do it in the room.
Yeah. As you said at the dining room table, I think that's interesting, because a lot of my listeners and people that are listening to this podcast are hockey parents, and not that they have to be hockey parents, but I mean parents in general. And what would be your advice to the parent that has a player in an environment that maybe they think isn't optimal, right? That this coach isn't a great coach, as you said. He's had some great coaches and maybe some not so good coaches. How do you handle the messaging to your son or daughter in that environment, as far as how they're supposed to show up and how do they deal with that situation?
It's interesting. I think that's a good experience for players. Ironically, the toughest time for them with the worst coach might be the best and most important experience they have in the game, as far as a life experience to train them for the future. So I really have tried in the past to tell my kids, first of all, and this wasn't great with my wife at times, but you have to deal with it. You have to talk to the coach. You have to work through this, because this is not the first or last time you're going to have a bad boss. And that boss is still the one making decisions on your success moving forward. So you have to find a common relationship with them, and you have to respect them, because at least respect their time, because they are putting in a lot of time. And so if they're good or bad at something, they find the thing they're good at and work through that adversity. And, one of the things I used to say to my kids all the time, and one of my boys repeats it to me now, but, when you go on the rink, just make sure everybody in the rink, every parent, every coach, every Zamboni driver knows who cares the most, because you work the hardest. If you do that, everything's going to work itself out. And then in the room, be a teammate.
Yeah, that's great advice. I think, I like how you said there, to figure it out. I mean, the idea of figuring it out, I believe that's an empowering place to put your son or daughter, or even somebody that's in your locker room for that matter. When they feel like that victim role or the helpless, that I am a part of something that I can't control, like that, like how disempowering is that, right? I mean, then you do feel that way, but I don't believe there's many situations where you totally have no control. And that's one thing that I definitely try and teach the players that I work with, and also with my sons, is, how are you going to solve this? How are you going to be a part of the solution? And what is your idea for the solution, right? And instead of mom or dad going into whatever the environment is and trying to fix it, right? Like that I believe is not teaching these young men or women the right way to go about it. So of course in my opinion, there's a spot in it, there's a time where potentially a mom or dad does need to get involved. There's some situations that maybe are almost toxic, but you have to allow your athlete, I believe, the opportunity to figure it out, right? To get involved. And that's the growth of the person again, I guess, back to my original point, and not just the hockey player. And hopefully we have strong young men and women that are growing through our sport, and through the good coaches and the bad coaches. But that is part of the thing, I think. But all these scenarios where we talk about adversity, when we look back, and I'm sure you'd say the same thing, like the toughest parts of my career were the ones that I'm now most thankful for, quite ironically. And they're the ones I hated the most at the time when you were going through it, right?
Yeah, but it's prepared you to impact other people, and I think that to me is the someone said, this is not my original, although I do love it. The reason we're so soft is there's no fights in the playground anymore. We don't let our kids fail, and so we enable them, and that to me, you talk to parents who talk about their son or daughter that has failure to launch. That just has a kind of a failure to launch. Well, you know why? You never asked him to launch. You've never made him or her. And sometimes that happens through failure. And that's happening, it's in my own home right now. I have stepchildren, and that's a unique relationship. And my wife was single for a long time with 3 kids and became their friend. And our biggest challenge right now is taking our hands off the wheel. You got to give them the wheel, and they are going to fail. And that's good. And once they fail, we'll help pick them up. And then they'll learn from that and they won't fail in a bigger situation.
Yeah, no, that's sage advice. You mentioned recruiting a few times. I'm going to shift gears just into that because that is something that, that's actually how you and I met, essentially, right? I mean, you were talking to one of my personal clients, and I can use his name, I assume, right? That's fine.
Yes, you can. I'm still disappointed in him.
in Nathan Mackey, who what a great story he is just in of itself. But for those listening, Scott was trying to recruit him and wanted to know a little bit more about him, and found out that I was working with Nathan, and then made a phone call to me to find out, what kind of makes him tick, and just maybe to help him in the process of having Nathan go there. And that was really interesting to me. And I think that's a credit to you too, and what you do and how you go about what you do, because a lot of people might not have done that homework to even make that phone call. But what is that process like? I mean, can you explain the landscape of college hockey recruiting? I've heard that it has to be someone on the coaching staff. First of all, is that true? And how do you guys go about identifying players that you think are Merrimack Warriors?
Well, it does have to be someone on the coaching staff that initiates any contact with the player. But obviously we do what everybody else does. We're on the road. We're watching a ton of video, because now you have access to almost every junior age player in the world via your computer. But then you're on the road and watching them play. But there are millions of really good players out there, and there are a lot of very focused, talented athletes playing our sport, and that's what's raising our game. So finding that talent isn't nearly as important in my eyes as getting to know that person. You're going to invite them into your living room, essentially. And ultimately in college, I could lose a lot of hockey games and keep my job. If I bring bad kids to our campus, I'm going to lose my job. And so I try to tell our assistant coaches and myself, because when I was younger, I ignored red flags, and it got me in trouble, our team probably in trouble. But just that you have to bring someone to our campus that you'd have at your dinner table. If you don't feel comfortable you'd have that guy at your dinner table, then we can't recruit him. I don't care how good he is. And the only way you're going to find that out is not to just talk to his coach or his advisor. You have to find people around him that can give you information that you feel could be valuable. And it's not always what the information is, because most people are trying to help that young man get an opportunity, and they're telling you positive things. But I'm lucky enough or unlucky enough to have been in this game a long, long time. So there's certain ways people tell you positive things that you can trust. And there's other ways people tell you positive things that is a forced effort on their part. And I try to see through that difference. And oftentimes in your case, it was a contact you had with Nathan. But it might be a school counselor school counselors tend to be very honest, because if a kid's aggravated them for 4 years, they're aggravated, and they'll tell you that. Assistant coaches oftentimes are a better resource for us than the head coach. It's the head coach's job to move those players on. We'll talk to teammates. If we have a player that's committed to us, and we have another player we're interested in that he's played, you will ask them, you're in our locker room already. Do you want that player in our locker room? What will he bring to our locker room as a human being? What's his work ethic? What's his commitment off ice? We already know if he's good or bad. Can he live a college lifestyle? Because there's a lot of temptation in college, just like everywhere. But you're on a campus with 4,000 people your own age. There's a lot of temptation around that, and so you're going to have to say no as an athlete more than you're going to say yes. So it's important that we get to know the guys and who they are and what kind of decisions they'll make when they're on your campus. And no doubt we've made mistakes, and I've made plenty of them, but you just try to limit them through information.
Sure. Well, it's an imperfect science, I assume, but I mean, it sounds like you're aligning your recruiting like much more than in the past, since you've shifted the focus of the philosophy to the dressing room first, right? I mean, dressing room first really matters, and now who's inside that dressing room really matters, which is crazy because it's aligning with what I'm saying too, the person before the athlete, and I love you saying that, because one of the things that I beat the drum with my players is to develop that, like, to not disregard the impact you have to make a difference in a locker room, right? In a community, around your coaches, among your fellow teammates, because if you want to take that, not even talking about junior 17, 18-year-old kids that want to move on, but let's talk about the NHL players that last till their mid 30s, mid 40s, right? Like you have to be an amazing person to be around that long. If you're a bad apple, if you're somehow a cancer in a locker room, you will not be there for very long. You have to be phenomenally good, and even if you're phenomenally good, a lot of times those players find a way to get out of the game. So I love that. I love that that's your focus, because having players and parents hear that, because we're so focused on, the points, and is my guy first is he the first one up in the power play? And, it sounds like, of course, you're looking for good hockey players, but not everybody's going to be the first guy, the top of the umbrella on the PP. You have to find other people to fill the puzzle pieces. And when you're talking about human beings now, okay, yes, can he skate? Can he shoot? What type of a person is he? Maybe that's a good segue into that type of a role player, which I believe is like so hard to get people to believe in it. When I say people, I mean young players, right? Like, let's say you're a 3-4 D man that you're not on the PP, you're not throwing up big points, but you defend really well. You're a great guy in the locker room. You value that role and you play physical. Is that somebody that Scott Borek finds? And if so, how do you identify that type of a player?
I almost think those are the hardest ones to find, just because it's the intangibles that make them strong, and finding out those intangibles are difficult to do at times. But we have had players who have done just that for us. I referenced those two players wearing a letter. Both of them are still here in their fifth year because they got that COVID year back. I think many programs would have let those two players go and replaced them with someone who is more talented. But their value to our locker room is irreplaceable. We're going to miss them more next year. We're going to miss some of our more skilled players just because they do things right over and over and over again. And they can sit on the bench for 56 minutes and stay connected to the game. We had another player who played in Nanaimo. Tristan Crozier was the captain at Brown University last year. His brother's a captain at Providence College right now. I recruited his brother Max to Providence, so I had a relationship with the family. Tristan was able to have his fifth year. He came here, and we played Boston College, and he's wearing a letter on his sweater. He says, this isn't one of the two guys I was talking about. He's our 13th forward in this game. He didn't play a shift, and he was so connected to the game that after the second period, we were in the lead. It was a stressful game. After the second period, he walked into our coach's little room there. Coach, I talked to you. And my first reaction was yes. But in my heart, I was like, oh, no. Is he going to make me deal with, his ice time in the middle of this game? And he said, Coach, I think there's a lot of stress on the bench and emotion. I think it's coming from you. And I was like, thank you, Tristan. I got it. You're 100% right. Let's move on. That won't be the case moving forward. He never even brought up ice time to me. And the game ended. All I did was celebrate him. We won the game, but I made sure the players understood the reason we won that game is one of the guys you chose as a leader had the courage and the wherewithal, even though facing severe disappointment himself, I'm sure, to say, hey, Coach, this is on you. And I love that. And that's happened to me twice this year. Once with Tristan and another time with a sophomore. Last game, we were playing great. We're down at UConn, and it was a very physical. It was a little bit tenuous where that game was going to go. The officiating was very involved, which I'm not saying that's good or bad, but it makes it more stressful. And after the second period, walked into me, said the same thing because I was all over the ref because I just was so frustrated. And he said, Coach, I think you were distracting us. I think you're distracting us. We got this. And then after the game, he apologized to me. And I looked at him and said, Ziv, that's the best thing you could have done. I need to be coached too. We're a family. Sometimes you got to tell your dad he's doing the wrong things or you don't like what he's doing. And I love it. And I encourage my players to, we coach in both directions. And as you can probably tell, I'm an emotional human being. And that sometimes is my best quality, but also sometimes my worst quality. And the fact that my players will come up to me and we don't use the word coach much. It's usually nicknames and say that to me. I tell you that because I'm proud of it. Not because but that's the team we have. And I'm really, really proud of that.
Short break here just to remind you about Up My Hockey and what it is. Because Up My Hockey, if you are new here or if you are just a casual podcast listener, is more than a podcast. Up My Hockey really is a philosophy, and the philosophy behind Up My Hockey and why I started what I'm doing is the belief and the philosophy of holistic development, of taking the traditional development mold of hockey to be a hockey player and turning that a little bit on its head and saying it's a holistic development of the person that's going to create an amazing hockey player. Now, I love hockey. I'm passionate about hockey. I'm passionate about winning games. I'm passionate about working on your release and your skating and the nuances of becoming amazing at your craft. And it's easy to fall in love with that so much. That is the entire focus. But the more I do what I do, the more I reflect on my own personal journey. The big gains and the things that I look back on from my hockey career that mean the most to me are the ones where I've learned about myself, and I've learned about myself as a person, and I've grown as a person, and as an athlete, right? So when it comes to whether I'm working with amateur athletes, minor hockey athletes in a hockey perspective, and I'm bringing them to boxing classes, or I'm bringing in basketball coaches to teach them boxing, the holistic development of the athlete, or whether I'm talking about mindset programs and personal development strategies and concepts about how to improve quicker than other people when it comes to your development and your practice habits, or your mental agility and how you can recover from mistakes, or how you can become more resilient, how you can build your passion for the sport, which is really the key component to everything, because that's going to help you push harder and get through the hard times. There are so many aspects of personal development, which really is player development, which I am now calling holistic development, that I am really excited about with Up My Hockey, that I feel is a bit of a differentiator when it comes to the marketplace and what people are saying out there, that I like it. I think that's why there's traction here. So if you are interested in personal development, if you are interested in becoming your best as a hockey player through a little bit of new age science, a new age perspective that is really based on old school philosophies, if that makes any sense at all, then Up My Hockey is the place for you. The conversations that we have here, as you've learned in the podcast, are somewhat new. I think they're fresh. And I think that my programs and my services on the other side of Up My Hockey really supply an avenue for players to grow as people. And as they grow as people, they grow as hockey players. And not only do they grow as hockey players, but they're able to be empowered in whatever facet of life that they choose. And they're able to impact their communities and their families and their teams. And make an impact. I mean, make a positive impact. And I do believe, as part of like my core mission of Up My Hockey and my core mission of what I'm doing now, is I really believe and want and strive that anyone that's involved in our great game of hockey, anyone that's associated with it, is recognized as an impactfully positive person in their community, in their church, in their organization, in their school. I want hockey to be, if you're a hockey player, or if you're a hockey coach, or if you're a hockey manager, if you're somewhere around the game, that this is a person that you automatically know is good people. It's a good human being. It's somebody that you want to be around. It's somebody that's going to have a positive impact on you and your inner circle. And I really believe that hockey can be that. I love the old line that, sport doesn't teach character. It only teaches character if the coach demands it. And I agree with that. I think as amazing as hockey is, or as sport is in general, it doesn't just happen because you're involved. It has to happen with intention. And my intention is to let's build some great people. So hopefully you're enjoying this podcast. Hopefully you're enjoying what Scott's saying. I kind of went on a rant here with this one because Scott seems really aligned with what Up My Hockey is and what my philosophy is for hockey players and those associated with it. So I thought, what a better time to really talk about, the message, the philosophy, what the mission statement is for Up My Hockey and why I do what I do. So yes, if you are into holistic development, holistic personal development, which also aligns with holistic player development, Up My Hockey is a great spot to be. Please share the episode. Please review the podcast. Please get involved in Up My Hockey, or get involved in the parent group on Facebook, or follow me on Instagram, or follow me on YouTube, and watch the videos and learn some of the strategies, tips, and tactics that I use when I'm working with players or teams to help them to become better people and better players. That's enough for me and Up My Hockey. Let's get back to the interview with Scott Borek, head coach of the Merrimack Warriors. What a credit to that player, because being selfless in a moment where he could have been selfish, right, is huge. And the team was first, and talk about endearing and something that'll be a story you'll tell 10 years from now. Like that's fantastic. And that's the type of player that you obviously have identified and wanted to recruit. And you've mentioned a few times now, I think, if I got it correct, like captains of other programs that you've now brought over. Is that part of something that, because I think that rule has changed, right? That the ability to transfer now, is that something that is you've identified as part of part of your recruitment strategy? Team people, leaders elsewhere that maybe would want to come and join your program?
When I first came, we recruited 16 players, and our mission was recruit the most competitive player on each team, recruit them as many letters as you possibly can. Because who's the guy with the letter? In some levels, it's the most popular guy, right? Or the best player, but it's also probably the most confident player. And you can't turn a program around without having a lot of swagger yourself. And so we couldn't coach that into a room that didn't have it. You could work on that, but that's going to take you a decade. We wanted to recruit it. So we had 16 guys come in. 3 of them were goalies, so we'll discount them. So there's 13 players. 11 of them wore a letter before they got here. So now the transfer portal opens up. The COVID thing happens. We lost some players. 2 guys signed National Hockey League contracts last year that were juniors that would have been our captains this year. One guy transfers grass is green or someplace else. So we went out and recruited 5 grad transfers. 4 of them were captains of their team before they came here. It was excessively intentional. It will continue to be that way for us. And hopefully we can build a stronger program because of that.
Wow, that's wild. How do you feel about that just in general, like the ability to transfer? I mean, it almost comes back to me. I think that there's an argument to be made about, you use the word soft, I'll use it again, like the softer generation, right? Like things aren't going good for me. So it allows me now the parachute to be able to get out and find something else. Do you think that that's, is that a value? Is there a place for it now? Obviously you're using it to your advantage, but how do you feel from a philosophical level?
As a parent, I wouldn't support it. My son coming to me and saying he wanted to transfer, I think I'd tell him, I think you got to go through this. But as a coach, I could take another job tomorrow and leave these players. And why would I be getting that job? Because they did well for me. They made me look good. So it's always the players. And so the fact that I have that ability, I think probably means that the players should have that right as well. But I also think that from a player standpoint, the grass is never always greener. Like for the 300 kids who have transferred in college hockey in the last 3 years or 2 years, or maybe 300 is probably too many, but it's at least 100. I bet you there's more horror stories than there are positive ones. We've had from our program probably, let's say, 15 players transfer since I've gotten here in the 5 years. Only one has had a really positive experience, and his was because he went down to Division III. And that was a decision he and I basically came to together. But guys who tried to find better situations at other places, it just hasn't happened. And I think that doesn't happen very often. Like the whole thing on relationship, as a player, you're going to go through adversity every single year at some point, at some level. What do you need the most? You need the trust of the coach. So we recruited you. So we've seen you play great. That's why we recruited you. We're probably also seeing you play average, but we still recruited you because we knew you could come out of that. Now you go to a new coach who has no history with you, has no relationship that he can understand that you are going to have bad days, or doesn't know that your family's dealing with something because he hasn't had to. I think it's a slippery slope for a player. We'll deal with it again this year. I'm sure we will. But I have a very good argument now because guys can look and say, wow, those guys haven't had very good experiences. And it's not because of the place they're going. It's because of the relationship they gave up.
Right. Yeah. Great point. Great point. When it comes to the recruitment of these players, and you're like you said, there's so many players, there's so many leagues, so many places to find players. How much do you depend on the network that you've created over all these years? Meaning, like let's just say I'm part of your network. Jason Podollan calls you and says, "Hey, there's this guy you got to take a look at." Like, do you have certain people that you trust and hold in high esteem? And obviously, you have to have eyes on them yourself and have your own eye test. But is that a way where you find some players a lot of the time from connections you've made?
It's probably the only advantage of being older, is that your network is bigger. You've had more opportunity to gain not only trust in people, but for them to gain trust in you, because you've had situations over and over together before. So yes, there's no question. Our network, and specifically during COVID, we recruited kids out of British Columbia, but we couldn't be there physically ourselves. So we had to trust certain people that we had built relationships with to get us to the point where we would be recruiting those players. And it's worked out really well. It's actually strengthened some of those relationships, which I think will be good moving forward. And the good thing for us is when you recruit your assistant coaching staff, you want to get people who have different areas of expertise or knowledge than you do. And so we have a pretty heavily Scandinavian roster right now. And I think we have 6 Swedes and 1 Finn. And I had no experience over there, but I made sure the people I hired did. And they've relied on that network and those connections to help us move those recruiting processes forward.
Because you said earlier, that it is the head coach's job of wherever, let's say, a BCHL team to move their players forward. Like that's something that is in their best interest for their program. But I think it is an interesting, I don't know what the right word is, but there's a bit of a problem there because they can't recommend players that they don't really believe in, because then that network that you're talking about, like that trust relationship breaks down too, right? So there's an intimate advantage of, yes, I do want to have this player move forward, but now if I recommend a player, I don't have full disclosure to Mr. Scott Borek, and now that player comes in, it's like the next time you make that phone call, you lose a little bit of trust in me, right? So I do think that that's interesting, and I guess that also over the length of time and the longevity of your dealings, you find out where the truth really is, right? And you can see through that, or directly the guy will be like, I don't think this is a guy you want. This guy's not for you, right? And then there's the trust again. And that's one other thing when I talk with my players about. I'm like, like the connections, the interpersonal connections matter. And that's not something you can fake. You need to be authentic and honest about those types of things. But don't underestimate the value of it as well, because I think, it's a people first sport, and people want to help people, and they also definitely want to help good people that have goals and dreams. So it's interesting how that all comes together, right? We're always so hockey forward focused, right? Stick handling, pucks, power plays, and this, that, and the other. And there's so much of a personal identity around being recruited, around how you get to where you want to go and the way you go about it. And I just try and shine a light on that, because I think it's way more powerful than players, and sometimes parents recognize.
No, and I think it's even if you look and I'm not going to mention teams or names of people, but I think you can see the consistently successful teams in the BC League. And I don't mean they have to be winning the league or even winning their division, but the stable franchises where the coach has been there for a little while. That's because that relationship works in both directions. We may get a player from X coach that will end up having a player that needs an extra year that we may send back to that coach, a different player so it's a two-way relationship, and that makes both programs more stable. And I think that's something that people don't always look at, because the recruiting process is full of things you want to hear. It's full of glitz and glamour. Doesn't matter if you're being recruited to a midget team or a college team, right? That's the coach's job. And so I think just looking behind the curtain a little bit, the relationships maybe, and you can see it just through the stability of their programs, where guys are, how successful they've been. And there's many guys in the BCHL who've been there a long time. You're not there a long time unless you are trusted. And I think that's an important thing for people to look at as they make their decisions going forward.
All right. You mentioned your staff and how I was going to ask you a question about that, like whether at the college level you were able to choose your staff, if that's something that a head coach is able to do. And you lost a staff member this year in Josh Sioko, and we talked prior if that's something that you'd want to mention. We also talked about adversity, and obviously how could there be bigger adversity for a group, including the staff, than losing part of the family. It seems like that's something that you guys have galvanized around and have allowed yourself to move forward, maybe even stronger than ever. Do you want to share a few words about Josh and what he meant to the team and how you guys dealt with such a significant loss to your group?
Well, Josh was my first recruit when I worked at University of New Hampshire, and I recruited him from Vernon, from Mike Vanderkamp. Strictly, I had known Mike when he was at Merritt, and he had good teams at Merritt. And so I reached out to him when I took this new job, and I said, who's your best player? Who's your most competitive player? Who should I be talking to, Mike? And he suggested Josh, and we recruited Josh. He ended up being a captain at the University of New Hampshire. And, every once in a while you have a player that you recruit and coach that you become a friend of almost as an assistant coach early in your lifetime together. And I would say that Josh and I, he was a sophomore, and I think that he and I became friends as much as we were anything else, because he'd say anything to me. And one of the proudest moments of my coaching career was Josh's senior year. Our seniors gave speeches at the banquet, which is kind of a tradition, I think, throughout hockey. And after his sophomore year, he was a good player, not a great player, but a good player. And I gave him a card that was called "Good is Not Good Enough," and it had some lessons in it. And so at his senior banquet, he pulled it out, which is 2.5 years later, and thanked me for that. Many years later, I had some personal tragedy, and Josh was close to my family at that point, and I lost my own son, who was 22 at the time, and Josh came up next to my other kids. So our relationship was so strong, and I think uniquely strong for a head coach and an assistant coach, that I lost way more than a coach. And we moved forward with our team. And if I can digress, tell you a quick little story about our team. So obviously we tell our team, I'm extremely emotional. Dan Jules, our other, Josh's partner, and the school, Merrimack's a Christian school, Catholic school. We have a service for him on Wednesday, and I get up and speak. The athletic director, we were supposed to play on Friday, and the athletic director asked me, do you want to play? And I said, frankly, no. I don't want to play, but if our players want to play, I'll go. He asked the players, they said they want to play, but we don't have to go unless coach can go. So there's a real strong relationship there. The athletic director, it actually probably helped me, because the athletic director was like, wow, you're trying to take care of them, they're trying to take care of you. We had the service, and we had made the decision to go on the trip, and I was very emotional at the service, and I'm walking out and I see our team, because they're all wearing the same thing, but 100, maybe 200 feet in front of me, and they were just talking, and then 3 guys came out of that circle, 3 seniors, and said to me, can you do this? Because we don't have to do this. We want to take care. And that's why we're winning hockey games. And I'm at a point where I understand that's the winning of the game means nothing to me right now. Steering a group of young men through this adversity and having them be better for it, because that's what Josh would want me to do. That's my mission this season. And I really think, because we've taken the focus off of the result and put the focus on our room and our relationships, that our team is having more success, ironically. But I love Josh. I miss him every day. Coaching without him is difficult, because he was the guy on our staff that would calm me down. I used to go to him, and when I was really emotional, and he'd just laugh. He'd break the ice in the middle of a hockey game. When he coached our power play last year. We had the #1 power play in the league, and now I'm coaching, and we're not as good. And I told our guys right when this happened, like I said, I'm going to coach the power play, but understand, you guys had a unique relationship with Josh. It's going to take me a while. I don't care if I'm the head coach or I'm the trainer. It's going to take me a while to catch up. So we've had to go into each other's lives that way and be patient with each other. And it's been very, very rewarding. And I think, and I hope that it's honoring Josh. And in my mind's eye, Josh and my son Gordon watching every game we play together. And that's how I go forward. And that's Josh meant the world to many of us. So I don't want to ramble on about it, but I'm glad you brought it up, because even though it makes me emotional, it brings them to life for me, and that's what I like to have happen.
Yeah, wow, Scott, that's I couldn't imagine, the way you speak about him, and obviously trying to balance the emotional loss with the job that you have to do, and the leader that you need to be for everyone else around you. It's trying, for sure, not to mention your own, personal family relationships too that's going on there. It sounds like Josh was a big part of all that. So never to be replaced, I'm sure. And then yet, like you said, you're now doing more, you're having more responsibilities. Is that something that is on the list? Like, do you need to have another support person in there, or is this going to be the way that the season rolls and then we'll figure that out later?
We're going to roll with it like this. I think originally I wasn't sure we could give the players the experience they needed without adding someone to our staff. And that was something I had to really walk through. And my athletic director has been incredibly supportive and talked through it with me. But now I see it as a way of honoring Josh, and I can do more, and everybody on our staff can do more. We're not going to fill the role he did perfectly, but he's going to stay in our hearts and on our bench and in our locker room. And I think bringing a new personality into that, it might actually disrupt our room, and it wouldn't really even be fair to that person. So we're going to roll right as we are and see where it takes us and deal with it next year.
Yeah, excellent. Well, you mentioned winning hockey games has become a bit secondary, and maybe that's not the words you used, but focusing less on the result. And yet here we are, the number 5 ranked team in the nation with eyes set, I would assume, on the potential of a national championship, which would be absolutely amazing. How do you keep that perspective and that grounded approach when really the pinnacle is slightly in sight? We both know that there's a half a season left, but things are rolling. You guys are on a hot streak. Must be feeling really good about yourself. How do you balance those two?
We just try to Hockey East, the league that we're in, is a grind. It's really deep. There's probably 8 teams out of 11 that could win it. If they went on a bit of a run, they have good enough teams that they could win it. There's very little difference between them. We're one of those 8, I believe. But what we're really trying to do is just focus on that next one. And right now that next one's Providence, and they haven't lost a game in the league yet. And that will be a challenge for sure. But I think if you get too far ahead of yourself, when I came to Merrimack, they said, what are your goals for the program? And I said, my goal is that we win a national championship. And the president and the athletic director thought that was a little audacious, and that we didn't have Merrimack had no history of being able to show they could even win the league, never mind the national tournament. And and Josh came with me. Like, he was on my hip when I took this job. So it was both of us who created Mission Merrimack. And I was like, well, why would we play? Like, I'm sure every guy in the National Hockey League wants to win the Stanley Cup. Why else would he play? I mean, I know there's other things that happen, but in our sport, as much as any sport, it is that room lifting like the cup, and in our situation, the piece of wood that's the NCAA trophy. And why else would you work so hard and put so much into it and sacrifice so much? So I talk about it all the time, and people have said to me in the past, and even this year, geez, do you think you can? I said, of course I think we can. Some people don't want to talk about it. I want to talk about it every day. That's exciting to me. And the winning would be special. The chase is something we can have. That's right in front of us. And we can have that chase. And what an awesome experience to have as a group, especially in all the other things we've talked about. So if you enjoy that chase together, it's not just me. If it was just me chasing it, it wouldn't be, number one, it wouldn't be attainable. And number two, it wouldn't even be fun. But when you have the whole group chasing it, which I think we are right now, it's a blast. It's really rewarding, and not just to the coaching staff. I think it's rewarding to every guy in our room. Today I walked up here today, and our captain said to me, "Hey, coach, are you? I know this is commonplace in the NHL locker room, but do you want to contribute to the fund for the equipment manager?" And that's never happened here before. Like, that's never come up. And I said, "Of course I do." I said, "What are you guys doing?" He told me what they were doing, and I was like, "That's these are 18 to 23-year-old kids who have given their money to someone that works really hard and they feel like it's underappreciated. And so it's all that stuff that comes with that, I think, that really makes it a fun experience.
Well, yeah, and to circle back to that word belief that we talked about earlier, like I applaud you for keeping it a part of the narrative, because you don't win something that you don't think you can win, right? So, like, having that discussion and having those young men like think about that, what it's like to hold that trophy and to be on that ice, being champions. Like, the more they live that and the more they think that, the more that you genuinely believe it. I mean, that's totally something that has to happen. Like, I'll tell a quick personal story. Like, I wanted to play in the NHL and I thought I could, but I never actually did any type of mental training about what I was going to do when I got there, like when I had the opportunity. So, like, it was, okay, now I'm wearing this NHL jersey, but I had never really done the homework, the mental homework, to allow myself to feel like I was supposed to be there, right? Like, I wanted to be there, but I didn't really know how I was supposed to be there. And that was one of the lessons that I took away from my own experience, and I try to impart on players now is that belief system. Yeah, where do you want to be, and really live in that spot where you want to be, even though you're not there yet, right? So for your group right now, they're knocking on the door, and the more you talk about it, the more you make that thing be believable, the more they're going to step into that and really have the opportunity to do it. So super fun. I really appreciate your time here today, Scott. I think that's a great probably place to end the interview. On the success of Merrimack and the last 5 years in your journey there to bring these guys closer to something that you've wanted to do from day one that a lot of people didn't believe in. So awesome job that you're doing there. It sounds like the players have a great environment to be a part of, and thanks for sharing all your wisdom here today.
I don't know if I'd call it wisdom, Jason, but I do appreciate the opportunity to talk about it. It's a lot of fun, and I think as a coach, you're honored to have guys in the room that want to listen to you. So if you get that honor, embrace it and move forward with it.
Thanks so much. And for those of you listening, this episode was live in my parent group on Facebook. Had an opportunity to sit here and listen live with Scott. You definitely could have asked questions too. So if you're listening to the podcast in the normal podcast channel, you can definitely join the parent group if you are a hockey parent, and then have the opportunity to listen in live and join the conversation. So Scott, thanks again for being here today. Best of luck with the rest of the season. We'll be in touch, I'm sure, in one way or another, and I'll be following the Merrimack Warriors the rest of the way. Thanks, Jason. Really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you for listening to the entire conversation with Scott. If you are still listening, you are amazing. You're sticking around to the end. And I shouldn't even thank you for that, because, what Scott had to say, it was pretty hard to turn it off. What insight, what an amazing experience, what an honest perspective, like even his ability to allow himself to be challenged by his players, to allow on his own personal self-assessment and reflection to know, hey, I got a lot of things wrong previously, and now I've had this new way to look at culture development and team building and recruiting. That has helped build this organization. I love that. If we can't be honest with ourselves, if we can't be honest when we look in the mirror to see where we can grow and how we can improve, we're not going to. So as long as Scott has been in the game, as many years as he's been involved in it, he's still looking for ways to grow. He's still looking for ways to improve and to provide more value to the players that show up to battle for him. And I congratulate that. And obviously, Scott, if you're listening to this, thank you so much again for your time and for your willingness to be honest and raw and to be emotional. And I think that that's something that I pride this show on is just having honest conversations. I try not to have these things be interviews. I try to make them conversational and discussions, and something that you would have around a family dining room table. And maybe that's appropriate because Scott did use that term, that this is when he recruits players, he wants somebody that he would want to have at his dinner table. And if you don't want to be at the dinner table, then you probably don't want him in your locker room, and you probably don't want to be battling in a 2-2 game and for a national championship with that player either. So, again, in that scenario, what's he talking about? He's talking about the person. He's not talking about the toe drags or the release of the shot, but he's talking about who is this human being that I'm going to be associating myself with. So, love that. I love that message. Continue to push for those players that are listening right now, or the moms or dads that are listening. Continue to push the personal development of your hockey player. Use hockey, the thing that they're most passionate about, to push them in other areas, right? To challenge their growth, to challenge their ability to sacrifice, to challenge their ability to grow as a teammate, and to grow their discipline and their commitment and their accountability to their goals and dreams. And if we can do that as hockey coaches and as parents, and if we can hear that message as athletes, my goodness, you are not only going to be blowing through expectations in the hockey world, but you're going to be set up for a prosperous and engaging and fulfilling life. So thank you again for being here. Excellent discussion there with Scott. Scott, thank you for being here, and I hope we have another chance to discuss it. And anyone from the Merrimack universe that is listening to this, or maybe to this program for the first time, like, what an amazing feel-good story, and what a great thing to provide school pride, and yeah, you must be really excited about what's going on there, and be really thankful for what that hockey team's doing for the atmosphere of the university. And I know that I'm a fan now, and I'm going to be following along and cheering you guys on to hopefully a national championship, and if not a national championship, the success the team is having this year is a sign of great things to come in the future. So thank you for everybody listening, whether it's the first time or for the 93rd time. I really appreciate you spending time with me today. And until next time, play hard and keep your head up.